Well, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be. This is Frederick Winsness, and I want to welcome everyone to yet another NetHope Solutions Center webinar. Today, we're excited to meet Twitter, Airbnb, and Twilio's disaster and crisis response teams. And before we get started, we'll go over our normal housekeeping rules. We would like to make this as interactive as possible, so please line up your questions in the chat window in WebEx. I would recommend opening the chat window right now to see the traffic going back and forth there. And please feel free to line up your questions, and we'll do a discussion and Q&A session at the end of the hour today. We will also be following up with the link to the recording and the slide presentations to this webinar later on today. That will be posted on the webinar posting in on the NetHope Solutions Center. And at the very end today, you will see a webinar satisfaction poll that will pop up on your screen right after we close things out today. We would certainly appreciate you answering those few questions, spending 2-3 minutes to give us a little guidance on how we did today and how we can do this better going forward. So with that, I want to introduce Gabby Allman. She is the Crisis Informatics team lead here at NetHope, and she will take over and introduce the rest of the speakers. So over to you, Gabby.
Great. Thank you, Frederick. And good morning to everyone. Good afternoon and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. An introduction to Crisis Informatics, if you haven't heard about us before. Of course, as you know, NetHope is a consortium of the world's 50-plus leading humanitarian organizations and really incredible technology companies. And what we do in Crisis Informatics is we try to do two things. One is we analyze, visualize, share information about what NetHope does around the world. But also what we try to do is share best practices and technology resources with people who are responding to emergencies all over the world. And with that, I'm so excited today to have the opportunity to amplify the incredible work that's being done at the three companies that we'll be highlighting today, so Twitter, Airbnb, and Twilio. So thank you so much to our speakers for taking the time to share your expertise and your resources today. I'm going to start by introducing who they are. So first, we have Kelly Bent, who leads Airbnb's global disaster response and relief efforts. In this role, Kelly works across the enterprise to respond to crises and disasters that impact the Airbnb community, which includes over 2 million hosts in 34,000 cities around the world. Prior to this role, Kelly managed Target's global crisis program. Next, we'll hear from Tom Tarantino, who leads Twitter's global crisis response program and is responsible for U.S. state and city government relations at Twitter. Prior to joining Twitter, Tom was Chief Policy Officer of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America in D.C. There, he oversaw the organization's legislative, research, and political departments. Then we'll have the opportunity to hear from Erica Balbuena, who's manager of Twilio.org, where she works across departments to increase the company's social impact. With the vision of sending 1 billion messages for good, Twilio.org provides nonprofit organizations with communications technologies to help them reach their goals and further their impact for social good. Prior to Twilio, she sharpened her community management skills at TaskRabbit and consulted for large and small nonprofits, including the Campaign for UCSF Medical Center. So now we'll get started by watching a short video from Kelly at Airbnb, and then Kelly will take the lead and talk about what's happening at her company. Thank you.
Great. So I just wanted to, we recently debuted that video in Mexico City. I was able to be there and present at an IDB, which is kind of the equivalent of the World Bank in Latin America, with the host and guests in the audience. And it was really powerful just to kind of meet them and have them see that video for the first time. This sort of captures our sort of quintessential program that we have within our disaster program. I'll go through the broader elements of it, but this is sort of the general look and feel of what we're trying to achieve, obviously knowing that we are merely one component of a response, certainly not the silver bullet to everything, but there is this sort of niche portion of a population that is able to be served in this way, which is kind of interesting. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly, and we'll switch over to presentation. Great. So I always start presentations just sort of articulating, because many people think of Airbnb as just people finding vacation rental homes around the world, and certainly that is a large part of it. But at the core of who we are, we're really about making it possible for everyone to feel they can belong anywhere, and that really is within our DNA all across the company. As you guys heard earlier, you heard some old statistics, which I clearly need to update some things, but we are now at about 4 million hosts worldwide, 60,000 cities in 191 countries. Kind of an insane portfolio, especially for those of you in the disaster space, understanding what this looks like and who've been in the world for a long time. So often people ask, you know, what does Airbnb have to do with this? Hopefully that video articulates one portion of the program and one way that we're trying to participate or help those in need, and so I'll try to articulate what that looks like more broadly. So how did our program start? So the history of our program really began with a community member. We call our hosts and guests community members, Shell, who was in New York City after Hurricane Sandy. And many of you on this call were probably there. I was deployed there in a different capacity when I was in the nonprofit space for a few months, so certainly understood the need there. Basically, she had reached out and asked, how can I list my space for $0? That at the time was not possible. If anyone's been on our platform, you know that 10 US dollars is the minimum that you can list your space for, unless you're a part of our Open Homes program. So we didn't call it Open Homes until just recently, so we have a new product capability and team behind it. So it does have a new look and feel for those of you that have been on it before. But literally over 1,000 people had opened their homes during Sandy, and basically the company realized that not only is this a need, but actually our host community is very interested in being a part of this. Now our program is actually much broader than this. When I talk about program, well, this started as a community initiative to see how we could support folks across disaster space. Really building out the program has occurred over the last 3 years to really understand where we can actually make an impact and who are we trying to bring into the community to support. So just some overall numbers here. We've responded to about 90 disasters globally with the Open Homes program. And then you can see sort of the numbers around nights donated and homes opened. This was, when it talks about homes opened for this specific program, that is for the disaster response program. Many of you have probably also heard about our refugee initiative. So when you saw the number on the Mexico City video, that also is inclusive of the other causes that we support. And when we talk about messaging, I'll speak a little bit to that because that's actually what we do almost every single day. And my team kind of teeter-totters between the philanthropy arm and the business side of the house. So last year, I think we were all pretty active in 2017, particularly between August and November. This is just a quick snapshot of where we were active and the different responses that we were a part of. I think a lot of folks think of us in the natural disaster realm, which is certainly the largest part of what we do, but we certainly also engage when there are terrorist attacks or mass casualty events. So I'll speak a little bit to that as well. So when we activate our community, for those of you that may not be aware, and we are currently calling it Open Homes, The page to your right is kind of what you see. So during August and November, when things were quite busy, and obviously this isn't inclusive of everything, but this was a quick snapshot of the different regions that were activated based on the events that were occurring. I can say we have a very small team. Sometimes when I do presentations, I try to articulate how tiny our team is. We literally are a team of 4. And so what now we're trying to do is build out the product side of the house so that the product is actually helping us reach more people and make it easier, because we do understand there have been some challenges with that. But to say the least, August to November, just like all of you, was a crazy time. How it works, so when a disaster happens, we typically start digging in to understand what is the need. So as many of you know, oftentimes what's shown on the media isn't the actual situation on the ground, better or worse. And so we try to dig in. So we partner with many folks on the ground, from government authorities like emergency management agencies or civil protection authorities to the nonprofit agencies like all of you, or other private sectors like Twitter and Twilio, and try to understand what is really the ground truth, what is the need. What we also try to say is that oftentimes we may not be the perfect fit for the most vulnerable. We understand that there's, obviously many people that need access to additional services, not just shelter. And so having that psychosocial, emotional support as well is obviously something that our hosts are typically not equipped to do. And so we have had some learnings around that and trying to ensure that we are meeting the needs of those that we're able to, and certainly not overextending ourselves, because we understand that that also puts both the guest and the host in sort of a vulnerable position. So once we've determined that activation is something that would be supportive, we basically send an email to all of our hosts in that area. They then can opt in or out. So this is a voluntary process. Many people think of us, initially they're like, oh, we need 100 rooms, and we're not like a hotel. So every single host has individual autonomy over their calendar and their pricing. So this is a volunteer program, and one of the biggest challenges we have is matching need and availability. So oftentimes many hosts might want to opt in, but they might only have 1 or 2 nights available in the time frame that we're asking people to open their homes. And as all of you know, oftentimes moving survivors around is the last thing we want to do. And so that sometimes can be a challenge. Now, the way that we're building the product now, we now have the capability of actually having the community be built pre-disaster. So before, the way the tool was created on the product side is our Airbnb hosts opted in, and then after the event, they basically fell off, or they weren't a part of a broader community. We're now building a broader community within the Open Homes platform, so people can be there on the ready to respond, and they don't necessarily have to be Airbnb hosts on the regular. And to be honest, the best hosts are the ones that aren't utilizing or aren't hosts on Airbnb every day, because what that means is they have more availability. When I spoke about response messaging, I'd always like to highlight this just because it is a large part of what we do, and a lot of people don't think of us in this way, but particularly when we're working with government agencies, it's important for them to know that we understand the importance of getting out sort of urgent information. And so what my team does is dig into what are local authorities saying, what is the ground truth, what are the right links, the Twitter handles, et cetera, that need to be shared. And then we try to get messaging out based on the type of event. We have certain criteria, triggers, thresholds, et cetera. This was specific to the Mexico earthquake. We also try to translate it both in the local language and in English. We also recognize that, many of our guests are multilingual, but oftentimes because of urgency, we don't have the time to translate in multiple languages. One other component that's been wildly successful and sort of shown up in different ways that we weren't really anticipating, but we provide travel credits to many relief organizations. So Mercy Corps and All Hands Volunteers being 2 of the organizations that we support. We obviously knew that them sending their advanced teams, this would be helpful. We also know in recovery that trying to infuse local resources to our hosts is super helpful, because we want to ensure that, local dollars and local economy is able to get back up and running. And so I think that was certainly a part of our objective. What we've also seen is that hosts actually end up becoming the organization's local knowledge, which is super interesting, along with becoming volunteers and then lifelong friends, which is pretty incredible. As I mentioned before, partnerships and relationships are pretty critical to the work we do. I think you all understand that. That's probably one of the reasons why you're on this call. But we really look at it as cross-industry, cross-functional, public-private, really everything we possibly can, knowing that situations often shift really quickly, and we also want to ensure that we're doing the best for not only the Airbnb community, but the larger community at large. And so these are just a couple examples of the different partnerships that we try to create. Obviously, because we are in 60,000 cities, it's not sustainable for us to make partnerships for every single community ahead of time. So we have sort of a risk-based mapping that we do to try to identify those that we can pre-disaster, and then also knowing that survivors of disasters are also the most apt to become more prepared. So we also look at communities like last year in 2017, targeting those communities to help those communities prepare, which is part of that is partnership, so that we're prepared for the next season. So this year, obviously looking at the Caribbean, Mexico City, Northern California, et cetera, to ensure we have some of those partnerships in place and build upon the work that we did last year together. A lot of people ask, so what does the next 5 years look like? I think the ideal scenario is that open homes becomes sort of just a known tool in the toolbox for communities, and it's not something that we have to continually educate and inform, but obviously we all know that that's typically, it takes a lot to get to even where we are today, and so I think the hope is that this becomes an easy platform for people to use. Again, a tool in the toolbox, not a silver bullet solution, but certainly something where people can be engaged. There's a way for people to feel like they have a bridge between losing everything and getting to somewhere, getting to their longer term solution. And then also one thing, I did speak about the travel credit program, but we do also, for anyone that's on this call, that when you send relief workers in, volunteers, et cetera, they are also eligible to utilize the Open Homes program. So that is $0 to all of you. So basically anybody that's involved in the Open Homes program, they waive their fees, we waive our fees, everything is free to those that are utilizing the platform. And then we are beginning and will continue to expand to additional causes. So this is a huge commitment by our founders. Many of you, like I said, have probably heard about our refugee program, but we will continue to look across various causes. But I do think, as you guys know, many of these causes are very nuanced and also additional, you know, when you put somebody in somebody's home, there is so much more that they need beyond that roof over their head. So I did that really quickly, but I also know that I'm at my time. So I just wanted to include a couple of links and email addresses. Emergency response @ is the way to get to my to the broader team really quickly. We can try to respond as quickly as possible. The first link probably has the most information about the program. The second link is the Open Homes link, but that is all being shifted, so I didn't want anyone to go there for more information. It's more for when we activate that is a good link, and we will continue to share that. We will also include Net Hope on our distribution list, so if you guys are part of theirs, they may provide that for you guys as a resource. So thank you, and back to you, Frederick.
Thank you very much. Gabby, I think we're going to move on to Tom, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, hold on, let me just pull up these slides. Okay, hi, I'm Tom Tarantino. I work on Twitter's public policy team, and I also manage our global crisis response programs. So one of the things that's interesting to note is that you'll hear from me and Kelly and Erica, and we all do coordinate and we work together. Because we realize that all of our products and platforms play different roles in the larger picture for disaster response, right? Because you use these services differently and your expectations are different. So people go to Twitter for real-time information. People go to Airbnb for housing. You go to Twilio for communications. You go to Google for archive knowledge. You go to Facebook to connect people. And so what we do is we all try to collaborate during a crisis to make sure that our platforms are optimized for what people are using it for. Now, for Twitter, the reason we even have this program is because we realize that during a crisis, people are flocking to Twitter. Our usage spikes, our downloads spike, basically everything around that crisis tends to get amplified on the platform. And so rather than sort of building a Twitter for disaster, we realized that, Twitter is sort of naturally made for that. And what we also understood was that you never want to build a disaster response app or make someone do something new on the worst day of their life. So for us internally, the program is really about training people to be really good at Twitter, because the best way to get your message out is just to know how to use it during a crisis. And then during a crisis, amplifying that information so that the best information gets to the most amount of people. And then as we go into recovery, promoting that information to make sure that the conversation doesn't die down. But I can talk a little bit about that, but what we're really going to focus on is what you do with Twitter during a crisis. And that's slightly different because, I can talk about what we do internally to the building, but it's actually not that interesting. And so what I'm going to do is give you a highly abbreviated version of the Twitter training that I normally give. I'm going to burn through this pretty fast, and if you want one in your market, you can just email me at the end, and I can try to set up with me or one of my colleagues. So when you're using Twitter in a crisis, you kind of follow the phases, right? During mitigation and preparation, you train, and then you build campaigns to build resiliency. During response, you connect with other people and you amplify your message. And during recovery, you organize and you communicate out the continuing response efforts. So the first thing you have to think about is your plan, right? You're going to create a communications plan. And the first problem that we always see with communications plans is that people have a social media plan and they have a media plan. We are not there anymore. We have moved beyond the point where we need to have a television and radio and some 20-year-old in the corner posting stuff on Twitter and Facebook. You have to integrate those messages because that's what people on the ground who are living through the crisis are interacting with. They're not looking at TV and then occasionally going on social media. You have to integrate that plan. And if there's one thing to take away from this, is that do not post the same content on all different types of platforms, right? This is a weird thing. You don't send your principal on a radio show and have him do the exact same thing he does on television, or the same thing you put in a press release, because people consume media differently. People consume social media platforms differently, and the number one mistake we see is people posting the exact same content through something like Hootsuite to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snap, whatever. What ends up happening is that the content looks terrible on every platform, and you're not optimizing for how people use the platform. And so if I was to give you one tip, that would be it. Moving on. Sorry, this is lagging a little. Oh no, pinwheel of death. Awesome. Let me see if I can get out of this. Someday they'll make things that work. Okay, so I'll just kind of move on. Next thing you can, okay, there we are. Shoot.
Maybe just restart it, Tom.
Yeah, hold on, here we go. Okay.
There we go.
So the next thing you can do is you know what people are going to need in a crisis, right? You know your market, you know the things that are going to happen. So create products, have them ready, because in a disaster, speed is very, very important. So creating infographics with things like hashtags for people that you're going to monitor, numbers, and also things that you know, like how to purify water or where to get safe water. Have this stuff ready so that you're tweeting it out as fast as you can so that we can help amplify that. When you campaign, understand that you don't have to get 1 million or 2 million people to look at a campaign. You can make campaigns very small and very targeted as long as they are clear and they are engaging and they do the 1 or 2 things you want the campaign to do. Keep it simple and understand scale and understand audience, and your campaigns will be very effective and people will remember them. Some markets, this is really popular in Southeast Asia, have created something called #for_help, where when emergency services and communications infrastructure can be either degraded or doesn't really robustly exist, you can create a system where if someone tweets with their location and a particular hashtag that you're monitoring, they can send emergency services and help. So like I said, this is really active in the Philippines and elsewhere in Southeast Asia. And during the hurricanes in Texas, we saw people using a hashtag like this to rescue. What ended up happening was when 911 went down, a group of citizens started going through Twitter looking for rescue hashtags, and they mobilized about several thousand civilian boats and ended up rescuing 10,000 people. So having this already pre-planned in your market is a really good supplement to emergency services. All right. So moving on, the core advantage to Twitter is broadcasting information, right? It's tweeting. In a crisis, you want your Twitter followers to do something different. Normally, you want people to come to Twitter, stay on Twitter, come to you on Twitter, and check out your feed and see what's going on and go through the timeline. During a crisis, you want people to get on the platform, get the information they need, and get the heck off the platform and get to safety. So when you are broadcasting information, you need to make sure that what you're putting out there is simple, clear, and gives them an action. You know, infographics, like I said before, are a great way to go beyond the character limitation, and make sure that as you're not threading your tweets as much as possible, because again, you want people to spend as little time on the platform as possible, and try not to link to third-party sites that you don't control for critical information, because those links can get stale. Usually what I would recommend doing when you have something that's very complicated, you put a very clear tweet, maybe add an infographic, and then you link to a blog that you write, that you control, so that you can make sure that that chain of custody for information is clear and it's actionable and allows people to get the information they need and get to safety. Twitter was originally designed as an SMS platform, and it still is. In most places in the world, when you text 40404, you're actually interacting with Twitter. If you go to t.co/SMS, you can find all the instructions as well as the list of international shortcodes. This is actually really important because when data networks are down, you can still use Twitter over SMS. And what I find the most useful is less about tweeting over SMS, but getting information. You'll see in the picture, you know, I'm pulling tweets from a feed. You can just pull the last couple tweets in the hour. You can tell it to text you every time that account tweets, and it acts as a notification. So it's a really good way to get up-to-date information even when there's no data. Every single account that you follow, you can get a notification every time they tweet. I get them from BART, which is San Francisco's public transportation system that rivals any in the third world. And I get a tweet. I get an alert every time they tweet that there's a delay. It means I get a tweet probably once or twice an hour. It's a little annoying, but I also know where the trains are. They're easy to turn on and off, and what we do is we tell people to a good thing to put on an infographic are, here are the accounts that you should turn mobile notifications on during a crisis. It is a good way to temporarily amplify information on a platform. It's easy to turn on and off. But keep in mind, if you are telling people to do that, don't spam your audience. Make sure that the tweets are all high quality and are really, really effective. That's a good thing to do in a crisis anyway, regardless of notifications. We also tell people that during a crisis to turn on location services. So we have location services turned off by default. That's to protect privacy and anonymity around the world. But during a crisis, you can not only tell Twitter to tag what city or what location you're tweeting in, but at the bottom, when you're authoring a tweet, you can actually add a lat-long degree to where you are. We tell people to do this in a crisis because it helps not just map information that people are mapping, but it also really helps with potential rescue. So this is part of the best practices that we tell people to do. We also tell people to turn off the timeline enhancements. We've made a lot of enhancements to the timeline so that you don't miss tweets from people you typically interact with. We also filter out poor quality tweets that may be abusive. During a crisis, though, you really want the strict reverse chronological timeline because speed and information timeliness is very, very important. So we say turn off the quality filter and turn off the show me the best tweets first. By doing this, by adding location and by turning on notifications, you essentially put Twitter in what I like to call crisis mode, and it's more amplified for crisis response. We use lists a lot here for crisis response. We have an evergreen list in every country that we just changed the members. And what a list does is it essentially curates your timeline. So in a crisis, if you want to see emergency services, local news, local influencers, friends, and family, and that's all you want to see in your timeline, and you want to get rid of the kittens and Kardashians and the rest of the internet stuff, you can do that using a list. So Twitter, @gov and @policy, and Twitter for Good publish lists locally whenever there is a crisis. I published one for the North Bay fires. Washington, D.C. published one for the hurricanes, and that link to that list is evergreen, and we just change out the members every time a new crisis happens. So what it means is that you can always link to our local and regional crisis list. And also build them for yourself and have your principals and your government officials tweet out those lists. They are a great way to curate information. So this is kind of like, this slide is a little stupid, but it's also the thing that everyone forgets. Twitter is a live, public, and conversational platform. We always forget to do this during a crisis, but feel free to interact, right? When people tweet at you, yes, you're getting a lot of incoming, but don't be afraid to respond to a few of them, especially if you start getting a lot of tweets asking questions that you might not be covering. Don't be, and this is difficult for government, but don't be afraid to tweet at people and interact with people. You don't have to be cool or funny. In fact, I recommend not doing that during a crisis, but that level of interaction not only amplifies the tweets, but it also amplifies the message, and it's just another tool to get information out to the broader population. So just a quick note about DMing, private messaging. We talk to neighborhood resiliency teams to build local DM groups. My entire global team at Twitter Policy, we have a DM group of just members of the policy team. We use it constantly. But during a crisis, especially if you have a family group or if you have a neighborhood group, it's a good way to just kind of keep those groups in your inbox, and then you can access backup communication if text messaging is down or the phones are down, or it's just another way. You can also share information from tweets. You can put tweets in private messaging and go in and out of the platform, but it's a really good way to get more information out to more people. So we do have a product called TweetDeck. What you're seeing is a real-time GIF of my TweetDeck during Hurricane Patricia in Mexico. TweetDeck is essentially a mobile command center. You can create columns based on hashtags, based on lists, based on who you follow. You can create hashtags for tweets that are only within a certain geofenced area. The functionality of TweetDeck is really amazing, and it allows you to follow multiple accounts. What's important about TweetDeck for government accounts is it also allows multiple people to run the same account, so that it's called TweetDeck Teams. So that if you have problems with multiple people logging into the same account, if you use TweetDeck, you can do that, and you can do that securely without compromising the security of your account. Periscope is a tool that allows you to broadcast. This video that you're seeing right now is actually from the Nepal earthquake. Periscope was about 2 weeks old as a product. This BBC reporter was waiting for his camera guys to set up. They were having trouble, and he said, forget it. He just pulled his phone out and started broadcasting live. It's a great way to do impromptu press conferences, put out critical information, especially like you have a road closure or something, you want people to see it. It's good to help confirm information as well with video and that it's live. It's also conversational. And you can also save them for rebroadcast later. It's semi-ephemeral, so you don't have to worry about it existing on the internet for the rest of your life. It doesn't have to be clean because in 24 hours it's just going to go away unless you personally save it. We also have the ability to curate bundles of tweets into a narrative story called Moments. This is a moment that we did with the government of Brazil about mosquito abatement during Zika. Back then, we had to use our team to do moments. Now you have the ability to curate your own moments. So if there's a lot of information you want to put out, think about putting it out in a moment in one tweet as opposed to maybe threading 5 or 6 different tweets together, especially if there is a lot of rich media involved. A moment is a really effective way for someone to scroll through and get a lot of information in a very, very short amount of time. It takes a little bit of curation, but it's very easy to put together, especially if you do it on desktop. And last but not least, there's Twitter ads. So if you are an NGO and we have worked with you, we have the ability to offer ads for good, which is an ads grant that allows you to disseminate critical information. Our ads platform has slightly better targeting, or actually it has a lot better targeting than typical tweets. And because our ads just look like tweets, they don't exist outside of the Twitter sphere, they have a lot more engagement. We know like the Red Cross uses promoted Twitter ads a lot to tell people where collection centers are. If you're a government, you can purchase ads, and it's a really good way to amplify information. I always recommend, if there is bad information that's kind of not getting suppressed enough on the Twitter sphere, putting out a very quick ad for less than $100 to get the right information on the top of everyone's feed is actually a really effective method. This is all just about knowing how to amplify the right information on the platform so that it surfaces so that the most amount of people see it in their feed. And just for an example, during the Nepal earthquake, we did about $80,000 in donated ads. It got about 6 million impressions with 100,000 visitors to the sites that they were linking to for those NGOs. So it's a really effective way to amplify message in a short amount of time. And that's really it. That was a very down and dirty version of this presentation. The longer one is a little over an hour, and we do it regionally and around the world in multiple different languages. If you're interested, you can email me at tarantino@twitter.com or DM me at @TomTarantino. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much. I think we'll pass the baton over to Erica. Go ahead, Erica.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I head up strategic initiatives at Twilio.org, and today I wanted to talk to you about nonprofit communications for crisis. So if you are not familiar with what Twilio is, we are communication platforms for developers and other folks to build in communications to their web or mobile app. And as you can see from this logo slide, you have used this probably 1,000 times and never known it. So if you've taken an Uber, when your driver texts or calls you, that communication is anonymized through Twilio. If you've received any sort of marketing message from any of these companies, they are leveraging Twilio to possibly engage you through SMS. The New York Times was doing something around the Olympics and sharing kind of updates from one of their reporters. We also, however, have a program called Twilio.org, which supports over 1,500 nonprofits and social enterprises with Twilio, and that is wrapped up in 3 ways. So the first of which is our Impact Access program. That is how we give you a $500 Kickstart credit and 25% off of our product. And that program is available to 501c3s or any charitable organization globally, social enterprises, and B corporations. Our second program is called Impact Core, and it's a way for us to allow you all to have access to volunteer developers, most of which are Twilions at this point. This program is about 6 months old, but we're hoping to get this into our larger, we have 1.6 million developers building on Twilio, and we also want to give them a way to give back and help nonprofit customers get up and running. This program is for anything from, I heard about this Twilio thing and I think I want to send some messages, to we've actually had a couple of folks build a hotline from zero to start in under an hour with one of our volunteers. Or if you are an engineer or developer yourself, you can get some technical advice. And then the third is funding. So we run a grant round, and I run the last two programs. We run a grant round once a year. It's actually kicking off in the beginning of May, and we are looking for companies who are leveraging Twilio and communications to create impact at scale. That grant round is anywhere from $50,000 to $250,000, and it's an open call, so anyone can apply and participate. You just keep an eye on the website in the next couple weeks. And then we also do impact investing at the seed and Series A stage, because we believe that all of our customers should have access to our capital, and we've made 2 investments to date. So today I want to talk to you about how Twilio is being leveraged for crisis communications. Trek Medics is a small nonprofit that we have granted to in the past, and they leverage Twilio to deliver emergency help where 911 services don't exist. So in the Dominican Republic, if something goes wrong, and this is the case in many kind of developing regions in the world, you might call the guy with the truck, the woman who has some sort of medical background, and maybe someone else that has a ladder. And there's kind of a patchwork system of a community that comes together around a time of disaster. But Trek Medics has figured out a way to create a product called Beacon that brings all of those people into kind of a group alert situation and is able to dispatch them when something happens. And about a year ago, we got an amazing story back from them that the alerts and notifications were actually able to save a 2-year-old boy from drowning. Here in the United States, we support the American Red Cross with leveraging Twilio SMS. Oops, excuse me. So for local disaster response within local communities for house fires and things like that, a volunteer was sitting in Chicago, running down either a paper list or an Excel list, dialing every volunteer to see if they were available. And this was a couple of years ago, so I think in this day and age, this is probably now something that we all think of. But for them, this change of taking that model of kind of a call down list into a mass SMS alert and just having volunteers be able to text back and say yes or no, I'm available, reduce their response time by 50%. Not only that, their volunteers are now more engaged. They actually appreciate the communication, and this is operating in 5 different chapters. It was built from a man named Jim McGowan in Chicago, who found a developer out here in San Francisco to help him build it. And Twilio, by the way, is not only available for developers, and I'll get to that later in this presentation, but if you're thinking, oh man, our IT department is small, or we don't even have anyone, not to fear. This is why we have Impact Core and other resources. So one of the other, if my slides are also freezing, but those are 2 customer examples. The main way that we've responded actually to crises, and I would say our program out of the 3 of us is probably the youngest, just because up to date it's been me responding to crisis in more of a reactive capacity. So these 3 examples are the most kind of common and I think the most useful examples of ways that our customers and community are leveraging Twilio to respond to disaster. And what usually happens when kind of disaster season occurs is I'm ready to go. I have we have our pricing, our emergency pricing ready to go, and account credits if that's needed. We have Impact Core volunteers kind of on standby. But most of the time, it's developers who built these tools getting in touch with us. So in the case of, I've talked about 2-way SMS alerts, but in the case of the contact center, we had a developer within our community who was familiar with Twilio. Friendswood, Texas emergency department was desperately in need of fielding all of the volume of calls. They tweeted out to us. I pulled in one of our employees, and within 36 hours, we had a full-blown hotline and contact center built. They ran it for about 3 weeks. They only paid for what they used, and it's now gone dormant. But the minute they need that again, they can press the green button and have it up and running. And that, to me, is really the power of the program that I'm now constructing going forward, is building these tools in a way where you all get it to a point whether, again, you have technical resources or not, where all you're doing is pressing a green button and paying for something that you are using at a highly discounted rate during a crisis, as opposed to kind of always having something up and running in the background. That's the That's the neat thing about Twilio. The chatbot also was kind of another notification tool. It is still running in Puerto Rico, but it, again, was a way to just text in any sort of keyword and get information about what was happening. So this is I just wanted to kind of pull up for a bit out of the customer stories and talk a little bit about our complete platform. Because once you create a Twilio account, this is everything that you have access to. So here on the bottom, our super network, which I'll talk about, is our team that builds relationships with actual carriers globally. So you can use Twilio to terminate or to send a text message anywhere in the world, but for someone in that region or that country to send one back to that phone number is dependent on their carrier and their costs associated with that. And so one of the things that we try to do is have phone numbers all over the world and actually have access to those numbers for our customers so that you can, those rates are reduced. In our programmable communication cloud, the second layer going bottom to top, this is where these are all of the different kind of levers and tools that developers can use to build into a web or mobile app. So from a channel perspective and chat, we have probably 30 plus messaging apps minus WhatsApp because they don't have an API yet, hopefully. But think of any messaging app that you're leveraging and you can build in Twilio. We see a lot of folks usually get started with either Twilio SMS or Facebook Messenger because of its ubiquity outside of the US. And then with our engagement cloud, these are additional tools that you can build in base. So Authy is our two-factor authentication if you're in a situation maybe where you're kind of on the ground and need to have only authorized personnel having access to information. That's a two-way SMS app that creates that alert and notifications as Notify, and TaskRouter and Proxy kind of help in those two channels. And then Studio is our product that we launched last year, and this is the part where where I myself am not a developer, and I am able to come in here and build a functional Twilio app within, if I was not a developer, probably within a couple of hours. If I had any kind of technical proficiency, I would say you could create something in under an hour. And then we have 3 modules in here for you to kind of get started and play around with, but we want to make this as easy as you see as kind of a drag and drop widget. And our documentation is also something we're very proud of because we want to make all of Twilio kind of accessible to everyone. I've touched a little bit upon the phone numbers, but I just wanted to talk about for a second our global phone number coverage. Last year we hit a big milestone. We have phone numbers in 100 countries. And again, what that means is that you have, in the 100 countries that we have, you will be able to rent a phone number from us, buy a phone number, and then build your app with access to these carriers in those countries, and more coming online. I would say the largest growing regions, just thinking about all of you on the phone who operate in developing regions, our Singapore office is Southeast Asia is coming online, LATAM is coming online. Africa and the Middle East just remain a bit complicated, but I would say Africa is a little bit ahead of the Middle East in countries coming online. And then these are some of our cross-functional partnerships. So again, we like to kind of package, we call it the Twilio.org Bear Hub. We want to support you in all of the ways that you need help, and this is why we always have a grant open call. We want to make our capital available to folks. Why I've worked to set up kind of emergency pricing internally and expedited things. We also are used from a fundraising and PR perspective. So also once you're a customer, we want to tell your story. If you become a Twilio.org customer and you're using us, we want to help co-market with you. We also have folks that are using us in fundraising cases where you're kind of usually texting in either reminders or motivational messages about fundraising and then linking to a forum offsite. And then with a humanitarian response, we also like to get folks and volunteer developers from Impact Corps involved in building software solutions. So this is my wrap-up slide. Just a reminder about kind of the Impact Access Program with the credits and discount usage. Impact Fund, again, like I said, will be coming up in a couple of weeks. So keep an eye on the Twilio.org website. And then Impact Corps, and forgive me, I didn't put the website on here, but if you go to Twilio.org, again, It's under the Learn tab in Impact Core. You'll be able to go there, and you don't even need to know your full question. You can just, you go in, you find a volunteer, and you give them a kind of a brief update, and then you set a time that you're available and give them a call. But please reach out to team@twilio.org if you have any questions at all. You will also need to set up a Twilio account before you sign up for Twilio.org, but I'm happy to support all of you in the upcoming disaster season. Hopefully none of it's too bad, but we're thrilled to share our communications platform with you. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much again to all of our speakers. I know that we have quite a few questions in the chat box, and we don't have time to get to all of them today. As a reminder to everyone who's listening in, you'll have the opportunity, one, to hear this presentation and share this presentation again as a recording. Also, we will be sending out all of the links and different important notes and action items that were shared today. One thing that I do want to say is that NetHope is, first, we're really excited to see so many NetHope members participating in these different programs that Twitter, Airbnb, and Twilio are offering. NetHope, we are doing some really incredible work helping to prep for the upcoming hurricane season in the Caribbean. If you aren't up to date as to what we're doing and how you can potentially support and partner with us, I'm dropping a link in the chat box below, and we'll also share information about that later. But again, I want to say thank you so much again to our speakers for your time, for sharing your resources. I think this is incredible for responders to know, to be aware of. And then thank you to all the attendees who shared an hour with us today and also shared your questions. Frederick, I'm going to hand it back over to you to close this out.
Well, thank you very much, Gabby, for organizing this, and thanks to all the speakers again. This is fabulous, and what powerful platforms to get the word out, and not only get the word out, but give affected populations a voice. Absolutely incredible. So this will be a very popular recording. I just put the link out there for where we find the slides and the recording for this later on today. And we have received a lot of good questions. Most of them already been answered in the chat window, so hopefully you got a chance to follow that conversation. I think what we're going to do, since that kind of went a little fast, we will create a little Q&A document, and we'll post that along with the recording and the slides on the website for this webinar. So with that, I think, well, we have 3 minutes left. So if Tom or Erica, I see Kelly had to drop off, but Tom and Erica, any last minute comments or suggestions from you?
I would just say that, as Tom mentioned that all of us work together, but this is, the three of us are part of a kind of larger group with additional Silicon Valley companies, and we do talk to each other, and we really try to make sure that we're keeping a pulse on what's happening and how each of us is responding. And it's part of a group called the Silicon Valley Disaster Group. It's just a peer group for us to kind of keep a pulse on things. But, if you reach out to one of us, we can kind of think of a tech company and we can probably get you in touch with that person. So view this as an open door for those conversations.
That'd be fantastic. And I think also as we here at NetHope is encouraging our members to become more digital, go through a digital transformation process, this is all about connecting directly with target populations, whether that is in emergency response or economic development or otherwise. So we should make sure those connections are really close between NetHope and that group as well. So with that, I think we'll close out. Again, thanks to everyone involved today. Thanks to the audience for a fantastic set of questions. And we wish you a great rest of your day wherever you might be. We'll be in touch soon. Take care. Bye-bye.